She should have said no. Every instinct she had, every warning her mother ever gave her, every late-night conversation with her friends about staying professional, every rule she had written on a sticky note above her bathroom mirror, screamed at her to turn around and walk out of that room. She didn't. And that one decision, that single moment of hesitation, would unravel everything she thought she knew about herself, about him, and about the invisible line between the life you plan and the life that chooses you. But let's go back. Because you need to understand what she walked into before you can understand why she stayed. Kimmy had been a nurse for 3 years. Not long enough to be numb, but long enough to think she had seen everything. Trauma cases, GSW admissions, men who came in at 2 in the morning with wounds they refused to explain and stories that never quite added up. She had learned to do her job and ask no questions. She had learned that in a city like this, curiosity was a luxury she could not afford. So when the call came in on a Wednesday night for a private room admission, no name on the chart, just a patient number, payment already cleared, full confidentiality protocol, she told herself it was routine. She clipped her badge, picked up the chart, and pushed open the door. He was sitting on the edge of the bed like he owned it. Shirt off, jaw tight, eyes forward. Scratches ran across his torso in long, angry lines, his knuckles split, a cut above his left brow still fresh. Whatever had happened to him, it hadn't been an accident. Before we continue this interesting story, please like the video and subscribe, thank you. He turned when she walked in. And then slowly a smile crawled across his face. She didn't smile back, she worked in silence, efficient, precise, no unnecessary contact. He watched her the entire time with an alertness that didn't belong in a hospital room. Not vacant, not medicated, calculating. Not going to ask what happened, he said. No. Most nurses ask. Not most nurses. He laughed, low and quiet. No, I can see that. She cleaned the laceration above his brow. He didn't flinch once. Yi-won, he said. She didn't respond. Not going to tell me your name? It's on my badge. He glanced down. Kimmy. He said it slowly, like he was tasting it. That's beautiful. She pulled back and looked at him directly for the first time. Mr. Yi-won, I need you to hold still. He raised both hands in mock surrender. Yes, ma'am. By the time she was done, she had learned 3 things about Yi-won. He felt no pain or pretended not to. He never looked away. And he was, without question, the most dangerous kind of man, the kind that didn't look dangerous at all. She walked out. She told herself she had forgotten him before she reached the end of the corridor. She hadn't. He was discharged 2 days later. She wasn't on shift when it happened. She came in that morning, saw the empty room, the stripped bed, the blank chart slot where his number used to be, and felt something she refused to name. She went about her day. That evening after her shift, she stepped out of the hospital into the cool night air, and he was standing at the bottom of the steps. No guards, no entourage, just Yi-won in a dark coat, hands in his pockets, looking up at her like he had all the time in the world. You can't be here, she said. Not a patient anymore. That's not what I meant, he smiled. I know. He tilted his head slightly. One dinner, that's all I'm asking. She looked at him for a long moment. At the cut above his brow, nearly healed now, held together by the butterfly strips she had placed herself. At the easy confidence of a man who was absolutely certain she was going to say yes and had the patience to wait for her to arrive at the same conclusion. She should have walked past him. She had a bus to catch. She had leftovers at home and a book she had been meaning to finish for 3 weeks. One dinner, she said. He smiled like she had given him something far more valuable than that the restaurant was the kind of place that had no sign outside. You either knew about it or you didn't. A private room in the back, low lighting, dark wood, a single candle on the table, a menu with no prices. Kimmy sat across from Yi-won and made a decision, quietly and without ceremony, not to be impressed. She was impressed. Not by the restaurant, by him. He asked her questions, real ones, not the performative curiosity of someone filling silence, but the focused attention of someone who actually wanted to know. About her family, her work, the moment she decided nursing was what she was meant to do. He leaned forward when she talked. He didn't reach for his phone once. Not what I expected, she said at one point. What did you expect? She considered it honestly. Someone who talks about himself. He smiled. There's not much about myself worth talking about. Don't believe that. You should. But he said it lightly, and the lightness didn't quite reach his eyes, she noticed. She went home that night feeling lighter than she had in years. She sat on the edge of her bed in the dark and stared at the wall and told herself firmly that this was a one-time thing. A story she would tell one day. Nothing more. Her phone buzzed. *I had a good time. Same time next week, asterisk. She stared at the message for a long time. She typed back, maybe, asterisk. She knew, even as she sent it, that maybe meant yes. It became a ritual every Thursday. The same restaurant, the same private room, the same candle burning low between them by the end of the night. But the conversations changed, deepened, widened, moved into territory that surprised her. He told her things slowly, the way you drain water from a wound. Careful, deliberate, born in Busan, raised hard. His father had been the kind of man who built empires and left very little warmth behind when he built them. Yi-won had inherited everything, the empire, the obligations, the enemies, the loneliness that came packaged with all of it. "Do you ever want out?" she asked one evening. He looked at her across the candlelight. "Out of what?" "All of it." A long silence. Outside, the city moved and hummed and cared nothing about either of them. "I used to think wanting out was a weakness," he said finally. "Now I think it might be the only honest thing left in me." She looked at him steadily. "That's not nothing," he said quietly. "It's not." She reached across the table without thinking and covered his hand with hers. It was the first time she had touched him outside of the hospital. His hand stilled under hers. He looked down at it, then up at her, and something shifted in his face, cracked open, just slightly, in a way she suspected very few people had ever seen. She pulled her hand back. He let her, but neither of them pretended it hadn't happened. 6 weeks in, she saw the other side of him. She was waiting for him outside the restaurant. He was running late, which had never happened before, when a black car pulled up sharply to the curb, and 2 men stepped out ahead of him. They swept the street with their eyes before he emerged. He was on the phone, speaking Korean, his voice completely flat and cold in a way she had never heard from him. He ended the call when he saw her, and the coldness left his face as quickly as it had arrived. But she had seen it. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Business," he said simply. She nodded. She didn't ask again, but that night over dinner she was quieter than usual, and he noticed. "Thinking about the car," he said. "Thinking about who you are outside of this room," she said. He held her gaze. He didn't deflect. He didn't smile. "I told you in the hospital I'm not a good man. You told me that, you didn't show me." Now she was quiet for a moment. "Now I'm deciding what to do with it." He leaned back. Something careful moved across his face. "I won't pretend to be something I'm not to make this easier for you. I'm not asking you to." "Then what are you asking?" She looked at him. "Just to know which version of you is real." He was quiet for a long time, long enough that the candle between them burned another centimeter down. "Both," he said finally. "They're both real. The question is which one gets more of me." He paused. "You're the only person who has ever made that feel like a question worth answering." She said nothing, but she stayed. She should have known it couldn't stay contained. 8 weeks after that first dinner, she was on her lunch break, a small cafe 2 blocks from the hospital, the kind of place she went to specifically because nobody she knew ever came there, when a woman sat down across from her uninvited. Korean. Polished. The kind of stillness that didn't come from calm but from control. She placed an envelope on the table. Kimmy looked at it, didn't touch it. "Open it," the woman said. Inside was a photograph. Her and Yi-won outside the restaurant 3 weeks ago, his hand at the small of her back, both of them laughing at something she could no longer remember. The angle was elevated, a camera she had never noticed. Kimmy set it down. "His name is Yi-won," the woman said. "But you know that. What you don't know is that there are 23 people whose safety depends on his stability. Alliances that are held together by his name and his word. One of those alliances includes a promise made 15 years ago, a promise that involves me." She paused. "My name is Soo-yeon. I have known him since we were children. I am not his enemy. I am not here to threaten you." "Then why are you here?" Kimmy asked. "Because he won't end it himself. And I think if you understood what was at stake, you would." She stood. "He cares about you. That is exactly the problem. The people who want to hurt him will see you. And when they see you, they will use you." She left. Kimmy sat alone in the cafe for a long time, the photograph face down on the table, her coffee going cold. She didn't call him that evening, or the next. She went to work. She did her rounds. She came home. She made dinner and ate it alone and sat in the particular silence of someone who is trying very hard not to feel the shape of what is missing. By the 4th day, she had almost convinced herself she was fine. Her phone rang. She stared at his name on the screen for 4 full rings. Then she picked up. "Where are you?" he said. "Home." Something happened. It wasn't a question. "Yi, tell me where you are. I'm coming." She took a breath. "I need to ask you something first, and I need you to answer me honestly." Silence. "Soo-yeon came to see me." A long pause, longer than she expected. What did she say? "Enough." Kimmy sat down on the edge of her couch. Is it true, the arrangement, the alliance, all of it? One word, no hesitation. She had braced for deflection and got none. Were you ever going to tell me? Yes, he said. I was waiting for the right moment. I know how that sounds. It sounds like an excuse. It is an excuse. His voice was quiet. It's also the truth. I was afraid that if I told you too early you would leave before you knew enough about me to decide whether staying was worth it. A pause. I was wrong to wait. She stared at the wall. Kimmy, the way he said her name, like it meant something, like it had always meant something. I ended it with Soo-yeon, with the arrangement, 3 weeks ago before she came to you. I ended it because it was dishonest to continue, and I have been dishonest about enough things in my life. She closed her eyes. No, this world is not simple, he said. I know what I am asking you to step into. I have no right to ask it, but I am asking anyway because the alternative, he stopped. The alternative is going back to a version of my life where nothing is real, and I can't do that anymore. Silence stretched between them across the city. I need a few days, she said. Take them. She hung up. She took exactly 3 days. On the third evening, she put on her coat and walked across the city to the address she had stored in her phone 3 weeks ago and never used. The address he had given her one night over dinner, quietly, without explanation, the way you give someone a key before you've decided to give it to them. It was a building in a quieter part of the city. No obvious security. Nothing that announced what it was. She stood outside it for a full minute before she went in. He opened the door before she knocked. He looked like he hadn't slept. She looked at him standing in the doorway, all the carefully managed composure slightly undone, the control he wore like a second skin worn thin at the edges, and felt something settle in her chest. Not certainty exactly, something more honest than certainty. The clear-eyed acknowledgement that this was complicated and difficult and made very little practical sense, and she was going to do it anyway. I have conditions, she said. He stepped back from the door. Come in. She walked past him into the apartment. It was warm, understated. Bookshelves, a window with a view of the city, nothing like what she had imagined and somehow exactly right. She turned to face him. No more photographs I don't know about. No more information I have to find out from someone else. If something affects me, I hear it from you first. I am not going to disappear into your world. I have my own life, my work, my people. I would never ask you to give that up. If I ever feel unsafe, I will move entire cities if that is what it takes. She looked at him steadily. He looked back. No smile this time. No charm. Just Yi-won standing in his own apartment at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night, looking at her like she was the only fixed point in a world that moved constantly beneath him. Okay, she said. He exhaled, just slightly. Like he had been holding his breath for 3 days. One more thing, she said. Name it. Nobody at the hospital finds out. Tension in his face broke, slowly. And what came through was something she had only seen once before, that unguarded, almost young relief, and this time she didn't look away from it. No one has to know, he said, and this time it didn't sound like a secret. It sounded like a beginning. The city looked different after that. She noticed it on the walk home that night, the way the streetlights sat in the puddles on the road, the way the night air smelled like rain coming, the way everything felt simultaneously unchanged and completely rearranged. She had walked this route 100 times. It had never felt like this. She smiled to herself in the dark and didn't bother to suppress it. 3 months later, the threat Soo-yeon had warned her about arrived. It came quietly, the way real danger always does. A car parked outside her building 2 mornings in a row. A man she didn't recognize standing near the hospital entrance when she left her shift. Small things. The kind of things you could convince yourself were nothing. She told Yi-won on the 3rd morning. She had expected urgency. Controlled panic. Some version of the cold voice on the phone she had witnessed outside the restaurant. What she got was stillness. He listened to everything she said without interrupting. Then he was quiet for a moment. Then he made 2 phone calls, brief and quiet, and by that evening the car was gone and the man near the hospital entrance was gone, and she never saw either of them again. She didn't ask what had happened. But that night, sitting beside him in his apartment, the city spread out through the window below them, she said quietly, "Is this going to keep happening?" He considered the question honestly. "Probably. You'll handle it. Always." She leaned her head against his shoulder. He put his arm around her. Outside, the city moved on in its loud, indifferent, beautiful way. "I'm not scared," she said. "I know," he said. "That's what scares me." She laughed. He pressed his lips briefly to the top of her head. They sat like that for a long time. in the quiet that had slowly become the most honest place either of them had ever lived 6 months after a Wednesday night hospital admission that was supposed to be routine. Kimmy walked into a family dinner in Seoul, and every single person in that room knew exactly who she was. Yi-won stood beside her at the entrance, his hand steady at the small of her back, and she felt the weight of every gaze at the table. His mother, his closest men, the people who formed the foundation of his world absorbed the fact of her. She kept her chin level. She had prepared for this the way she prepared for everything, thoroughly, quietly, without flinching. His mother stood up first, small woman, sharp eyes, the posture of someone who had survived things she would never discuss with anyone. She looked at Kimmy for a long, unhurried moment. Then she looked at her son. Something passed between them, wordless, old, and the woman nodded once. And that was that. Dinner was loud and warm and nothing like what she had expected. Yi-won translated jokes for her with a slight color in his face that made her laugh harder than the jokes themselves. His most serious lieutenant, a man she had been quietly intimidated by for weeks, asked her with complete sincerity about her work, and spent 20 minutes asking follow-up questions with the focused enthusiasm of someone encountering a world entirely new to him. By the time the table was cleared, she had been folded in so naturally she almost hadn't noticed it happening. On the drive back, she was quiet for a long time. Watching the Seoul skyline past the window, lit up and enormous and indifferent to small human things like the way her chest felt right now. "You were nervous," Yi-won said, "extremely. You didn't show it. I'm a nurse. I perform calm for a living." He glanced at her, reached across and took her hand the way he had started doing, simply, without announcement, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "My mother asked me last week what I intended to do about you," he said. She looked at him. "What did you say?" He kept his eyes on the road. The corner of his mouth turned up. "I told her you were the first thing in my life I had no strategy for. The first decision I made that had nothing to do with calculation or consequence." A pause. "She said that was the most sense I had made in years." Kimmy laughed. "The deep kind, the real kind." She laced her fingers through his. And somewhere between everything they had been and everything they were still becoming. The man who ran a world and the woman who had walked into his hospital room and refused to be impressed by any of it. They rode through the city together in the quiet, with nothing to hide and no one left to hide it from. For the first time in as long as either of them could remember, they were simply, entirely free.